Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon and today I am back with my favourite books of the year so far. 2021, the top of the bookish pops, basically, up to this point. Now, it is August. I'm only going to include the books that I read up to the middle of the year, and so therefore the end of June. And it's been quite interesting doing that because there are some books that I know will join these books. And actually what I've done is I've chosen basically 6/7 non-fiction books and 6 fiction books, and it felt like that quite easily because I don't know if any of you have had the same thing. I have read some books that have been absolutely incredible, utterly amazing, brilliant, lots of them, and then I've read some that have been like absolutely brilliant, amazing, extra amazing, and those are the ones that I'm going to talk about. They've been amazing for all sorts of reasons. It's quite a sort of diverse mix, which is always a good thing, but yeah, it shows that I read quite widely, and that some people might think, oh, why is that book in there when that one's not, etc., from what I've read so far this year. Although, to be fair, I've not been very good at wrap-ups this year, have I? So yeah, and I wonder if that's added to it, this kind of weird feeling that I've got about reading this year, because I have felt my reading's been a bit stoppy-starty. I am coming out of a funk, which was just because I've been so busy with work and lots of it, which I'm very, very lucky to have, and I'm not moaning at all, and a lot of my reading is for work, and that's a joy, frankly, because books are my biggest passion. To be able to work in a field that is your biggest passion is like brilliant. But yeah, I think it has meant that my relationship has shifted with books a bit, where I need sort of breaks from reading more than I used to. But anyway, this isn't my mid-year thoughts about how reading everything's going. This is my telling you what my top 12/13 books have been. Also, random fact, 12 is my second favourite number. My favourite number is 24, which is obviously 12 times 2, but I'm not doing 24 books, I'm just doing 12. And I've only got until Love Island is on, so not long, so I best get cracking. Right, first up, non-fiction wise, I'm going to go non-fiction, fiction, non-fiction, fiction, non-fiction, fiction, non-fiction, fiction, non-fiction, fiction, because why not? And I enjoyed saying that. I thought I was going to mess it up, but I didn't. Anyway, non-fiction wise, Somebody to Love by Alexandra Hemingsley is the book that I want to talk to you about first. This is an incredible memoir about Alexandra's life, both in terms of her relationship with her body and also how when she is pregnant, which obviously is something that happens to your body, and some of the various things that she goes through with that pregnancy, at the end of it, her husband announces that they are transitioning to becoming a woman. And this book looks at that, looks at queer family, looks at what family means, looks at what our relationships with our bodies are, looks at gender in all sorts of ways, and is just absolutely fantastic. I love Alexandra Hemingsley. Hemo is basically how I know her. I thought this was utterly phenomenal. I listened to it on audiobook. Alexandra reads it. It's just brilliant. You need to get to it if you haven't. Then, in a similar line of conversation, actually, is What's the Tea by Juno Dawson. Oh no, I meant to be doing fiction next. Sorry. But you got a teaser there, whoopsie. So, fiction-wise, I'm going to go, actually, I'm switching around a bit, with Grown Ups by Marianne Keyes, which I have read twice this year. I read it earlier in the year when it was me and Melanie's book group pick. I'll link that video down below if you want to go and find out more. And then I've reread it on audio recently with Marianne Keyes reading it, which was a joy. And I've realised I like fiction on audio if I've read the book before. It's really comforting, and it's something I didn't realise. I'm not very good on a first read on audio with fiction. Fine with non-fiction, but fiction I tend to sort of just wander off and stuff if it's longer than an episode of The Archers. Anyway, so this is all about the Casey brothers, but really is actually all about the Casey brothers' wives, and these 3 sister-in-laws kind of take the main focus of this novel, which is really about all the secrets that are underlying in their family. That one sister, after hitting her head at the very beginning of the book, starts to basically spout all of these truths and secrets in front of everyone and starts airing their dirty laundry. And then we go backwards through various family get-togethers as these secrets begin, and we watch them kind of tangle and entwine, and then obviously everything kind of comes to the fore and how everything unravels afterwards. I thought it was brilliant. I think it's really, really funny. There's lots of characters, but every single one is individual. Every character has flaws. They all come fully formed. I think Marianne Keyes looks at some really dark topics really well, and I had the pleasure of interviewing her on set at Sky Arts Book Club this year, which is the reason that I listened to it on audio. I don't know if I said that. And she was an absolute joy and a delight, and yeah, I want to read a lot more of Marianne Keyes. I didn't think she'd be my cup of tea. Totally is, absolutely bob on sort of thing that I really, really love. And what I think I've realised as well this year is that I want to read a lot more books that are, how can I put it? I don't know. There's just a joy to reading Marianne Keyes books that I haven't felt for a little while, and I can't quite put that into words properly. I'm still thinking about it. Anyway, there's that. So it'll be no surprise to you that the next book I want to tell you about is What's the Tea by Juno Dawson, which is all about looking at the conversation around transgender. And Juno Dawson writes with such humour, and she really knows how to engage an audience through her non-fiction writing, just as she does with her fiction writing. But there's just really, really lovely sides. Funnily enough, I listened to this on audio as well. There's really, really funny asides, but it's also very frank, very direct, very honest, and just a brilliant insight into what it's like to be trans, the whole trans movement, how we can be better allies. And I thought I knew quite a bit about the trans community. I clearly didn't know enough. This really, really helped me learn more, and I think it would also be a brilliant starting point for anyone. So this is the kind of book that should be in all school libraries, and I've actually bought my mum's school library a copy of this, and I'm buying many more queer books for it because I think it's really, really important. So yes, incredible book. Then on to fiction again, and this is The Manningtree Witches by A.K. Blakemore, which was our Desmond Elliott Prize winner this year. I was lucky enough to judge this this year. It was really, really good fun. I had an amazing time with my fellow judges. This book gave me the book tingle from the off. It's based on the real case of the Manningtree Witches in the UK, and follows in particular Rebecca West and her mother. I always want to say Bedlam, and that isn't right. Beldam, that's right, Beldam West, who were in history, although Rebecca is only fleetingly mentioned, so A.K. Blakemore used that as a way in to then write the story. This is the kind of historical fiction that just gets me so excited about that genre, because it is very much set in its time, and yet in a way is told in a very contemporary, relevant way. It's really gritty, it's very funny, it's very dark, there's lots of troubling themes going on, but themes that also really, really sing out to the present day, but not done in a heavy-handed way. This is a really deft novel, and also is just masterful storytelling, like utterly phenomenal storytelling. And I can't, if you're looking for a really good ripping yarn, particularly I guess later in the year when it is more witchy season, I guess, for books, then this is something that you simply have to head to. Even though you know what is probably going to happen to lots of these characters, especially when the Witchfinder General turns up, you are still kind of hoping that the history doesn't happen and that something else does instead. And also what shocked me was there's a love story in here that I absolutely loved, and I'm not big on love stories, so yeah, I heartily recommend this. Then going back to non-fiction, I'm including these two books together. I haven't read the third in the trilogy. I'm holding it off because I don't really want it to ever end. They are Deborah Levy's books. First up, Things I Don't Want to Know, which was published quite a few years ago, I think, and The Cost of Living, which is much more recent. So to kind of encapsulate both of them, the way to describe these are that they are Deborah Levy writing at various different points in her life, and what she's writing at that time, and looking at how she goes about writing, but also looking at what it was like for her as a young girl growing up, how she left South Africa and all the reasons behind that. Then we follow how her marriage breaks down and how her relationships with her daughter are. And we also hear about some of the things that she likes to read, the relationship with her mother, so much. And it kind of, one is just this incredible life story of an incredible woman, but two, really gives you an insight into the writer behind the books, that if you read them and you, like me, love them, it gives you, yeah, like that extra insight and that extra layer. So I put off real estate because I just kind of don't want it to end ever, but at some point I guess it will. These are her living biography, basically, she's described them as, and I really wish it wasn't going to just be a trilogy. I think it should be a lot more. A book that I just have thought about endlessly since I've read it is Mrs. Death by Selena Godin, and I think this is an absolutely phenomenal debut novel. I'm so excited to see what Selena Godden writes next. And there's a couple of other debut novels that I've read since the middle of the year that have also really, really blown me away. I mean, you know that I love a debut novel anyway, because I think authors really, really pack a load into it. But yeah, this is quite unlike anything I've ever read. This is about Mrs. Death, who is Death, but she's a middle-aged black woman who many people would just not notice until she comes to find you. And it's how she starts a relationship with a young man called Wolf, who sort of writes her life story. But also at the same time, we go into various different periods of history where Mrs. Death meets certain people from those times, and we follow their story. It's a book that celebrates life, to a point celebrates grief and death, but also I found very comforting when death has been something, I guess, that with the, Pandora's box that's been going on the last year, with all of that, it has been something that we've been facing a lot more. And I think there are some books where if it was about death, it might make me turn away from them. And actually, I've just realised there's a real theme with the next non-fiction book, actually. But this is so... I can't describe it any other way than kind of comforting in a way, even though some of the book is very dramatic. Some of the things it looks at are very dark and uncomfortable, but yet it's just brilliant. It's a book that I already want to reread, and I didn't think I was a big rereader, but there's actually a couple of books on here that I would like to reread, or indeed have reread. Ooh, spoiler. Actually, one of the books that I have read twice this year, and teams with the theme of Mrs. Death, is The Madness of Grief by the Reverend Richard Coles, which is his memoir of his partner David dying, and how he has dealt with that and how he's dealt with the grief since. And it happened very recently before the pandemic, and it's one of the most raw memoirs I think I've read around the subject. And I have been with people when they have died, and it has given me a real change in my relationship to death. I'm a lot less scared of it, having seen it, I guess. But it is something, like I said, that because of the Panda Pop, I've been thinking about loads over the last 12 months or whatever. And what is it now, 18 maybe even? And this book again, whilst being very unflinching, very frank, Reverend Richard Coles gives you everything. Like, even some moments that don't make him look great, but also the really funny moments around death and the really bizarre moments around death. And also, I will say, I was nervous this was going to be really religious, and it isn't. It's in there, but it isn't, And then there's one line in this book that has kind of stayed with me and will stay with me forever. And I almost want to get it tattooed. And that's where he says, we often think that we're the protagonist or the narrator of our own story, but in fact, actually, we are a library of other people's stories. And that, honestly, just gets me every time. I'm getting very emotional thinking about it. I read this for a real life book group, online real life book group that I've rejoined, but also then read it for the podcast Turn Up for the Books, which I am one of the hosts of, which is going to be on BBC Sounds from October. So I've had the pleasure of interviewing Reverend Richard Coles about it, and he was incredible, which I think has made me love the book even more. So yeah, absolutely phenomenal. Then... have I gone? No, I haven't gone out of kilter. Then onto a book that I will admit took me a few chapters to get into, but I completely and utterly fell in love with. I also really, really want to reread this again, because I think I'll get even more out of it on a second read. Who am I? What's going on here? I mean, actually, doubly Who Am I? I even did a TBR game this month. I don't even normally have TBRs. I'll link that down below in case you missed it. But what is the book, Simon? Get on with it. It's This One Sky Day by Leonie Ross, or known as Poppy Show in America, because that is the fictional Caribbean island which it is set on. And through kind of a single day, we follow various characters as something big is happening on the island of Poppy Show. But as we follow them, we start to discover that they all have a little bit of something. They've all got a little sprinkling of magic about them. They can do all sorts of things. It might be that they can touch things and make it any flavour they want. It might be that they can tell when people are lying and feel it through pain. Some people know when other people are going to die. I mean, honestly, it goes on and on and on. And as we meet these characters and follow their stories, we get kind of the whole history of an island, be it literally the history of it, the political history, the myths and legends, the kind of social mores, the culture, the sort of hierarchy of society, everything. And it comes so fully formed. You really feel like this place could exist and the magic within it could exist. And I just loved it. And yeah, I would really, really, really like to read it again. So cannot recommend This One Sky Day, or as it's known in America and other countries, I think, Poppy Show by Leonie Ross. Just phenomenal. Yeah, I kind of want to give that book its own video. And that's how actually I feel about quite a few of those, but I don't tend to do single reviews. Anyway, back to non-fiction. And this book just kind of, I don't want to say blew me away because it sounds quite wrong to be talking about. It is Gay Bar, Why We Went Out by Jeremy Atherton Lynn. And this is an absolute non-fiction treat. It's cheeky and irreverent. You can tell that from the front because, let's be honest, it's got a glory hole on it, so that kind of says all it needs to. It is very salacious. It is very sexual. It's one of those books that sometimes I was reading on public transport and thinking, I hope nobody can see what's on this page. Yeah, I just thought it was fascinating, and it really looks at the history of the gay bar, why gay bars have existed, the people that go there, what happens, in all of the quite explicit detail, but I found that titillating and funny and sexy and great. And also it sort of looks at what the state of that is now, and forget, the whatever we want to call it, Pampers, the pandemic. Pampers, nappies, really, Simon, I've got to think of some better code words for pandemic than that. Anyway, it looks at kind of these moments of history, I guess, social history, and there was lots of things in this book that really resonated with me, but also I think would be, whilst possibly shocking and a bit like, ooh, a really important read for anyone who's coming to terms with their sexuality. But yet also I felt quite sad because this kind of stuff has sort of got lost. Like, I'm not saying I want to go out and do some of the things that go on in this book that I may or may not have done in my youth. But I don't know, it made me feel sad for that. These social spaces that have been so important and informing and, I don't know, sort of building, I guess, for people to have kind of gone missing. Anyway, really, really great, really, really saucy. Get to it. Sorry, I literally sneezed at the camera. So my penultimate fiction choice is one that gave me nothing but joy. It's that kind of book. It is joy within a book. It is Still Life by Sarah Winman, one of the absolute best books I've read in years. I think it's going to go into my all-time favourites. I can't decide, and I know that I'm preempting that some of you may ask this in the comments, if this beats Tin Man or not for me. I think they're both so different and so incredible in their own ways, you just kind of can't even compare, which is so exciting when you find an author like Sarah who does those sort of books. Anyway, this is all about Ulysses and Evelyn, who meet during the war on a random night where they kind of become friends, and that friendship over one single night ripples throughout their lives forevermore. We then follow, well, we sort of follow Ulysses, but really follow the people back in England who he left behind, get to know all of that amazing cast of characters and see what he's coming home to before he comes home. Then all I will say is this book becomes a case of found family, and also very much about this woman, Evelyn Skinner, who I think might be one of my favourite characters in fiction, possibly ever. And I would love like a whole book, like Sarah, if you're watching this, I really want a whole book of Evelyn. Anyway, it's utterly joyous. What Sarah Winman manages to do, which I think is utterly phenomenal, is she can make like a whole story happen in a paragraph. Like, there's a murder that happens and it's literally dealt with in 2 paragraphs, but it's like huge to read. I can't quite describe it. It's like she makes these mini epics within this epic book, and yet what it's really about is celebrating how the extraordinary nature of the ordinary in a lot of ways, and how, you know, the effects that people can have on our lives without us really knowing. And found family, as I mentioned, it's just gorgeous. It's got a queerness to it that I also really, really adored, and yeah, I think it is phenomenal. It even had a talking parrot that I really, really enjoyed, and I hate talking animals in books generally. So this book now, I've put it in non-fiction, but I guess it could be seen as auto-fiction. It could be seen as, yeah, it's an amalgamation of things. And I think that's one of the things that I loved most about it, apart from the writing, which is just utterly phenomenal. And wow, is how I feel about this book. And that is, in the end, It Was All About Love by Musa Okwonga. And this tells of a man who is turning 40, which is the age that his father was when he died, so he's dealing with all of that, and he has left the sort of country of his birth and moved to Berlin and wants to find love and find himself there. And it's how he goes about it and how that does and doesn't happen, and also the ripples of the history between him and his father and his culture, and what it's like to be a black bisexual man. And honestly, it is just phenomenal. I don't feel like I can do this book any justice whatsoever, no matter how much I try and talk about it, because really it's a book that you just need to experience and you need to read, and read the kind of, there's wonderful poetry within here as well. The poetry is written on these black pages with white text. The rest of the book is the other way around, and it's written in vignettes, which I really, really love. It's just incredible, and it's such a book about kind of now, but has this kind of timeless feeling. You know that people can read this in years to come and it will really help them in a lot of ways, and the way it looks at love. And yeah, I fell in love, frankly, with Musa Okwonga when I read this. So that's all I'll say about that. Then, last but not least, because technically it's my favourite book of the year so far, so I'm doing it this way around, but anyway, is, no surprise to many, The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. And I just love this book. I just feel like I've spoken about this book a lot. And it got to a point where I was worried that I was talking about too much and possibly I was going to get like a cease and desist because I loved it that much. But it's about two men who are slaves on a plantation called Empty, and it's how they fall in love before there is the term for queer or homosexual, or it has a label basically. It also looks at the history of a tribe. It kind of looks at it's got the ripples of so much history within it that I felt like was being channeled through Robert Jones Jr. as he wrote, to give voice to those who've had no voice and have had no chance to tell their story. And I just think it's phenomenal. I technically read it last year, first of all. Well, no, I didn't technically. I did read it last year. First of all, I got an early proof and fell in love with it then, and then had the pleasure of doing an event with Robert, so got to reread it again for that, and I fell in love with it over another reread. I fell in love with it over again then, and yeah, I just think it's so powerful. It's very emotional, and you need to be in the right frame of mind to read it, I would say. But I think this is the sort of book that does change you in a way, and I can't quite describe that. I haven't got the words to describe that at the moment, I don't think, still, and that's after having read it, I think the first time, last autumn into winter, so I mean it has been a while, but this book has stayed with me. I think about the characters so many times. I think the way that kind of the book spirals out outside of these lovers, and we meet characters that are heinous, and we meet characters that are so understanding. We meet characters who are villains, but we kind of understand why they become villains because of the circumstances that they're in. And it's just, yeah, The Prophets is phenomenal. I think it's a masterpiece. I was gutted, along with actually Leonie Ross's This One's Got Out, that this wasn't on the Booker long list, because I just think it's so incredible. Actually, why isn't it still live on the Booker? Anyway, let's not go into that. Yeah, I thought that this was just phenomenal. I almost don't have the words anymore, but I did do a whole video on it, which I'll link down below so that you can go and find out more. Because sometimes I do think books need a whole video, and quite a few of these I feel like that could be the case, and then I feel like, have I shortchanged them by only mentioning them here? And then wrap-ups, when I've done them this year. But wrap-ups are going to be back. Anyway, there we go. Those are the books of the year for me so far, my top books of 2021 so far. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of them, what you thought of them, which ones you're thinking of heading to. Are you now going to try and read all of the books that I mentioned? You could. Yeah, let's have a chat about brilliant books, and tell me what your favourite books of the year have been so far. That I would love to know too. Until next time, which might be a live with my mother, because it is Summer Book HiBearNation from Friday, which is a week of reading from your bookshelves, from prompts that me and Mum pick, which I'll link down below so that you can find out more, because people quite possibly watch this video, because these are some of my favourite videos to watch at the middle of the year, even though now we're admittedly heading quite quickly towards the end of the year. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. I'm waffling because I can't do end of videos properly. I will speak to you all soon. Bye.